In a kingdom nestled between the Silver Mountains and the dark Aegean Sea, there lived a king who had 3 daughters. The eldest 2 were lovely in the way that mortal women are lovely, warm and bright and soon forgotten. But the youngest, whose name was Psyche, was beautiful in a way that made people go very quiet. Travelers would walk days out of their way simply to stand in her village square and watch her pass. Sailors anchored their boats just to catch a glimpse of her hair in the morning light. People stopped leaving offerings at the temples of Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, and began instead to leave flowers on the steps of Psyche's home. This, as you might imagine, did not please Aphrodite at all. The goddess stood on the high cliffs of Olympus and looked down at the little girl who was drawing her worshippers away, and she felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel: envy. She called to her son, Eros, the golden-winged god who carried a quiver of arrows that could make any creature fall helplessly in love. And she said to him, in a voice smooth as still water and sharp as a blade beneath it, find this Psyche. Pierce her heart with your arrow. Let her fall in love with the most wretched, miserable, ugly creature you can find. A serpent, a beggar, a toad. I do not care. Only make her suffer the way she has made me suffer. Eros spread his golden wings and descended through the clouds. Meanwhile, Psyche's father had grown worried. His 2 older daughters had both married fine princes, their wedding processions long and joyful, their futures bright. But Psyche, more beautiful than either of them, had never once been asked for her hand. Men admired her the way they admired a statue from a reverent distance, too awed to approach. She sat alone by the window each evening, watching the sun descend into the sea, and she felt a loneliness so deep it had become almost a companion to her. Her father traveled to the oracle at Delphi and knelt in the smoke and shadows, asked what fate the gods had arranged for his youngest child. The oracle spoke in riddles, as oracles always do, but the message was unmistakable. Dress her in the robes of mourning. Lead her to the highest cliff at the edge of your kingdom. Leave her there alone. Her husband is not of mortal kind. He is a creature of the dark and the air, feared by the gods themselves. He will come for her. The king wept. The court wept. Even the servants wept, pressing their hands to their mouths as they packed Psyche's things. But Psyche, strangely, quietly, did not weep. She held her father's hands and told him this was simply the shape of her life, and that she had always known she was meant for something strange. They dressed her in black silk and walked her to the cliff at dawn, the whole procession moving in silence, except for the sound of sandals on stone and the distant crying of seabirds. They left her there at the edge of the world and turned and walked away without looking back, because none of them could bear to watch. Psyche stood at the cliff's edge and looked out at the vast gray morning. The wind rose around her, warm and purposeful, as if it had been sent. And then, gently, so gently she almost didn't notice it at first, it lifted her. The west wind, Zephyrus, carried her like a leaf, like a secret, down from the cliff and across a valley she had never seen, green and still and filled with the sound of running water. He set her down in a meadow of soft grass, and she slept. When she woke, there was a palace before her. No, palace is too small a word. It was a building made of things that should not be buildings, columns of gold that caught the light and threw it back in fragments. Floors of mosaics so fine they looked painted, ceilings open to the sky in places, letting in shafts of warm air that smelled of cedar and night-blooming flowers. Fountains murmured in courtyards. Somewhere, Music played, a lyre softly, as if the house itself was humming. She walked inside, and invisible voices greeted her. "This is your home now," they said, soft as breath. "We are your servants. Whatever you wish, you need only ask." She bathed in water infused with rose and laurel. She ate a dinner of roasted figs and honeyed bread and wine so dark it was almost black. She slept in a bed piled so high with soft things she felt as though she were sleeping on clouds. And that night, when the lamp had been blown out and the room was completely dark, she felt the warmth of someone beside her. He did not show himself to her. He only spoke, a voice low and careful, like someone who had spent a long time learning to be gentle. "I will never hurt you," he said. "I ask only one thing. Do not try to see my face." Days passed and then weeks. Psyche discovered she was happy, genuinely, quietly happy in the way that creeps up on you when you aren't paying attention. The invisible servants brought her everything she needed. The garden was full of paths she had not yet walked. And every night, in the warm dark, her unseen husband would talk with her for hours. About the stars, about the nature of love, about the dreams she would had as a child. But she missed her sisters, she asked, gently, carefully, if perhaps the west wind might bring them to visit. Her husband hesitated. Then he said yes, because he loved her, and love is frequently its own undoing. Zephyrus brought the sisters down into the valley, and they walked into the palace with their mouths open and their eyes going everywhere at once. They sat with Psyche in the courtyard and ate the honeyed bread and drank the dark wine. And Psyche watched their faces shift from wonder into something else, something harder and more familiar. "Your husband," the elder sister said, very carefully. "What does he look like?" Psyche, who had prepared for this, said brightly that he was tall, broad-shouldered, brown-haired, often away hunting. The second visit, she said he was older, a merchant, often traveling. The sisters noticed the inconsistency. They pressed. And then, with the particular cruelty that only those who love us can manage, they said, "Do you know what the oracles said about your husband? That he is a monster, a serpent, a thing of darkness. You have never seen his face. Don't you think you should?" The seed of doubt, once planted, does not need much water. That night, Psyche waited until her husband's breathing slowed into sleep. Her hands were trembling. She reached beneath the bed and found what she had hidden there, a small clay oil lamp and a sharp iron knife, because the sisters had convinced her she might need to cut off the head of a serpent. She lit the lamp with shaking hands and held it up. What she saw made her breath leave her body entirely. He was not a monster. He was not old, not a merchant, not a serpent. He was the most beautiful being she had ever seen. More beautiful even than she was, which she had always been told was impossible. His golden wings lay folded beneath him like a second blanket. His hair curled softly against the pillow. His face, in sleep, was open and young and utterly unguarded. It was Eros, the god of love himself. She knelt there, trembling, and leaned closer to look at him, and a drop of hot oil fell from the lamp onto his shoulder. He woke with a cry. He saw the lamp. He saw her face, and what was in it? The guilt and the wonder and the love all tangled together, and for a long moment neither of them moved. Then he stood, and his wings spread, and the expression on his face was the saddest thing she had ever seen. "I came to you to do my mother's bidding," he said quietly. "But when I saw you, I put down my arrow. I chose you instead freely. All I asked was your trust. And now," he flew out through the open ceiling into the dark sky and was gone. The palace dissolved around her like salt in water. The fountains went silent. The garden fell to weeds. The invisible servants ceased their soft movements. Psyche stood alone in a bare valley, in the grass, with nothing but the last warmth of the oil lamp in her hands. Psyche wandered. She walked until she could not walk, then sat down beside rivers and spoke to them, asked them to carry a message to Eros. She knelt at the altars of every god she passed, Demeter, Hera, all of them, and begged for help. Most looked away. Most could not afford to offend Aphrodite. Eventually, with nowhere left to go, she walked to the temple of Aphrodite herself and knelt on the cold marble floor and said, "I will do anything you ask." Aphrodite looked at her, this small, dusty, red-eyed mortal, and felt something she was not expecting, a grudging, reluctant respect. She decided to give the girl tasks that were impossible, because impossible tasks make excellent punishments. The first task was a room filled with seeds, millet, barley, poppy, lentils, all poured together into a mountain of a heap. Every kind of grain mixed with every other kind, and Psyche was given one night to sort them into separate piles. She sat down in front of the mountain and felt, for the first time, that the world was simply too large and she was simply too small, and she put her face in her hands. But ants came, thousands of them, moving in long dark lines across the floor, each one carrying a single seed, placing it with its own kind. By dawn, every pile was sorted perfectly, and Psyche sat in the center of it all, astonished. The second task was to collect golden fleece from a flock of rams that grazed by the river. Rams known to be violent, maddened by the sun, dangerous to approach. A green river reed whispered Psyche as she stood at the bank, "Wait. Wait for midday, when the heat drives them to sleep in the shade. Then go, and gather what clings to the brambles at the river's edge. You need not face them directly." She waited. She gathered. She returned with golden fleece clinging to her arms like sunlight. The third task was to fill a crystal jar with water from the river Styx, the river at the very edge of the underworld, guarded by dragons, flowing through cliffs so sheer and tall that no mortal could climb them. Psyche stood at the base of those cliffs and looked up and felt the hopelessness of it as a physical weight on her shoulders. Then an eagle, Zeus's own eagle, descended from the sky, took the crystal jar gently in its talons, flew to the one unreachable point where the dark water ran closest to the surface, filled the jar and brought it back to her. Each time she was helped by something small and quiet, ants, reeds, birds, as if the world had decided, softly, that she deserved a chance. The fourth task was the most terrible. Aphrodite smiled when she gave it, and the smile did not reach her eyes. "Go to the underworld," she said. "Find Persephone, queen of the dead. Ask her to fill this box with a measure of her beauty. For my own beauty has been worn thin by the worry of caring for my injured son. Return the box to me. Do not open it." Psyche knew that no living person went to the underworld and returned. She climbed a high tower, intending to throw herself from it. Death seemed the only door, but the tower spoke to her, the way things had been speaking to her, quietly and practically. "There is a way," it said. "Listen carefully." It told her where to find the entrance, a cave near a certain lake. It told her to bring 2 coins for the ferryman, Charon, who would not carry those who could not pay. It told her to bring 2 honey cakes for the 3-headed dog, Cerberus. It told her to refuse every offer of help she received inside the underworld, because those offers were traps. It told her, most importantly, do not open the box. She descended. She paid the ferryman. She fed the dog. She walked through the gray kingdom of the dead, past the soft, wavering shades of those who had lived and lost their light, and she found Persephone's palace, dark marble and quiet as snow, and she knelt and delivered her message. Persephone looked at her for a long time. Then she took the box and returned it sealed and said nothing. But her eyes were kind. Psyche walked back through the underworld with the box held carefully before her. She passed Charon's boat again. She climbed back toward the light. And as the light grew ahead of her and the world began to smell again of green things and salt air, a thought settled into her like a stone dropping into water. What if she opened it? Just a little. Just enough to take a small measure of Persephone's beauty for herself, so that when she found Eros again, she might be beautiful enough for a god to love. She opened the box. There was no beauty inside. There was only sleep, an ancient, heavy, terrible sleep, the kind that belongs to the dead, and it rose from the box like smoke and covered her entirely, and she fell where she stood on the hillside and did not move. Eros had been recovering in his mother's house, the burn on his shoulder slowly healing, his heart slowly not healing at all. He lay in his room and stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about Psyche's face in the lamplight. The guilt and wonder and love all tangled together. He tried not to think about the way she had spoken to him in the dark. Her voice low and careful and entirely unguarded. The way voices are when the speaker does not know they are being truly seen. He rose. He flew out through the window before anyone could stop him. He found her on the hillside, the empty box beside her, motionless in the deep sleep. He knelt beside her and gathered the sleep gently from her skin, the way you might lift a blanket from someone, and put it back in the box and closed the lid. Then he woke her. She opened her eyes and looked up at him and said nothing for a long moment. "You keep saving me," she finally said. "You keep needing it," he said, but his voice was warm. He carried the box to his mother himself, and then he went to Zeus, the father of gods, the keeper of the scales. And he stood before him and asked for something that had never been asked before. "Make her immortal," he said. "She has passed through the underworld and returned. She has sorted the seeds and gathered the fleece and carried the dark water. She has done everything that was asked of her. She deserves to stay." Zeus considered for a long time. He had a complicated relationship with Aphrodite, and with his own son Eros, and with the general chaos that love tended to introduce into his otherwise orderly universe. But he also had a soft place in his enormous heart for persistence, and for love that survived being tested. "And you," he said to Eros, "will you stay with her? Not as you were before, visiting in the dark, hiding your face. But truly, truly," Eros said, "Hermes was sent to bring Psyche up from the earth to Olympus. She arrived tired, dusty, with calloused feet and dark circles under her eyes. And the gods looked at her with curiosity. This small mortal who had walked through the underworld and bargained with death and kept walking. Zeus handed her a cup of ambrosia, the drink of the immortals, and she drank it, and the exhaustion left her body and her soul, her Psyche, which had always been the most extraordinary thing about her, became something that would not fade or age or be forgotten. Aphrodite, watching all of this, found, to her own great surprise, that her anger had cooled. The girl had suffered. The girl had endured. There was, perhaps, something in her after all that was worth the trouble she had caused. Eros and Psyche were married on Olympus, properly this time, in the light, with no secrets between them. The whole of heaven attended. Even the flowers seemed to lean in toward the ceremony, the way flowers do when they are near something that is